in Salesforce, we installed Plinqx. So we've got our integration layer now within the Salesforce platform. So what we're going to do is we're going to call the Bceptor API. So within Salesforce, what we're going to do is when the contact record is updated, we're going to then fire off a API within the Plinqx platform called update contact. And then that's going to push the data into my API on the other end, which I've been very creative for and just call it /test. So the interaction is going to be contact updated. Then we're going to have the update contact event, and that's going to push our data. What we're going to do is we're going to complete that and say this is a REST call. And if you really want to, you can go and document how that JSON should look like. And if I have sample data, I don't, we'll grab that in a bit. You can put that onto your diagram. Or what we do is sometimes we use you can use Word or whatever, depending on how you want to communicate to your clients. There's other tools like Confluence, which is just an online document repository, and it is really good with versioning. But and I have these diagrams of all that in there, obviously, and it's just all in one place. But that's our integration design done. It's really simple. You can go to the nth degree. You can break this up into a business or a system process. Those processes could be broken up into swim lanes of actors and what have you. And I'm sorry, I know I'm going into, so this is a swim lane of systems, but you could actually break those blocks up more and more and more, or dive or zoom deeper in. But I'll just keep this high level. So this is our API. It's an outbound. It's going to be a REST call. And what we're going to do is going to be a post call. So yes, we're going to do a post just like we post a letter. Is exactly as it's going to be it. All right. So if we go into Bceptor itself, it's not that one. It would be this one. If I open this up into my mock rules, I'll see that my /test is there. And in here, it's just going to give me a response back of awesome. I can go and construct this response any way I want to. But for our demo today, I'm not really doing anything with the response. All I want to know is that a 200 code was received back from the external system. So I'll send a list through as well. There's different status codes that systems can give you. 200, 201 is success, 401 is timeout, 500 is we've got a big problem. So that's not most likely not your problem. It's the guy on the other side that something is broken. But I'll send you that list through. So, but this is my endpoint address. So /test. So I'm going to send it to this address plus /test. So that's, remember the analogy of the home, right? So this street /, that's my API address. Now, back to my requirements is if a contact is updated, I need to send something. So there's a few ways we can do this in Salesforce itself. You can use a screen flow if you want to and build that into your screen flow. But what we're going to do is we're just going to use a flow trigger. So if we go into Salesforce, we've got our contacts tab. So again, that contacts tab could be in your CRM or whatever. I've got my records here, John Smith. So within John Smith, I've got not a lot of data. So obviously being a demo, but I've got a first name and a last name at least. In Salesforce, as you go through training, you can add more data fields and change these page layouts the way you want to. But from this page, I'm going to go to the edit object page. And then within the edit object page, so this gives me a view of that database table in the back end. I can, once the demo comes over, plays with, I go down to flow triggers. So within flow triggers, I've got one that I already pre-configured, but very simple is I can just click the new button here. The new button will take me directly to the flow designer. And in here, I can start building the logic that I need to meet my business requirements. So in this case, I'm going to use something I've already configured. Almost there. So I've got the start. So exactly like that other one is, I've got my start condition. Within my start condition, it's going to be the contact. And it should trigger when a record is updated. You can choose whatever you would want. So on any of those conditions, so when a record is created, updated, or created or updated, or even deleted. So it's up to you. And then if certain conditions are met. So if I go back to the new one, these conditions are empty. So I can just go and say when all of these conditions are met, or some of them's met, or a formula evaluates true, or your own logic. So if you think about your own logics, and I'll step through that, we all had maths back in the days where you would have calculations of brackets first, and then this, and then that. So it works exactly the same way. But yeah, you can set your conditions itself as to when this should fire. So select a field. It could be start with change. There's null, and you can add more and add more and add more conditions. So it is what it is. If it's an and, if it's an or, any of these conditions are, or when custom logic is, you can go and say when 1 and 2, sorry, it's case sensitive, or 3. So 1 and 2 must be true, or 3. And you can build that out. But anyway, so you will cover that as you go. So mine is just very simple. So when a record is updated, the first name is changed equals true. So run this every time when this requirement is met, and then action related records. There is this little button here at the bottom that you need to slide. And that's just mainly because of a Salesforce. So if I go and slide this one, it adds an asynchronous pass into my decision. The reason for that is that we're using for callouts in Salesforce asynchronous paths is because Salesforce has a rule. You cannot send data to an external system if you have data in that same transaction writing to the database table. So if we do it in an asynchronous, Salesforce will run everything on the database first, and then it will come and call this, which puts us in the clear. So that's why we're running the asynchronous path. So what we're going to do is this is a Plinqx component. So within the flow, we do have the actions one. So within actions, here on the right-hand side is all the components within the platform or partner packages. So there's a Plinqx library. We'll send you the documents for these two that you can go through, but this is to help you build integrations. So what that would do is we're using the get contact as JSON. So that's just using this component here, not it's S object to, sorry. Yeah, S object to JSON. So remember we've spoken about JSON earlier. So it's going to take the Salesforce data object that it has, and in Salesforce world, we call it an S object, and that's going to transform it into a JSON so that we can work with that in integration. So that's what that component is going to do. It's going to take the triggering contact, so the record that's come into this journey here, or this path, it is of a type contact, which is the database object, and then convert that into an output. And then I have the suppressed nulls here as true. So basically what that means is if I go back to John, you can see we've got a lot of empty fields here. So I don't want to send empty fields. So we're suppressing them. But if you want to send everything, you just mark that as false. Sometimes systems don't want noise. So only send data that's valid. So we're going to suppress that. You can yourself then choose whether you want to assign the output of this into a temporary variable, so something that just sits there in memory. It's your choice. So you can go and say, whatever the output is, go and store it into my variable, whatever that variable is called test, or I can call it Graham, which is not a good way of doing it, not because it's Graham, but we're good developers, so there's a good naming convention. So you could go and say this is my var contact JSON. So give it a name, because sometimes flows get really complex and having a decent name behind it does make sense. But anyway, so if I do that in this way, that will just assign it, and anywhere in my flow, I can go and reference var contact JSON, and the system would know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm not going to do that, because then my demo is going to break. So, but that's what you can do. The next step is, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to transform that contact data. I am then going to make it so that this system can get it the way it needs to. So the output of this little step here, we're going to put it into this one, and the Salesforce system does that for us. So that's the transfer, that's this source JSON. So the output of that above, we're still going to ignore nulls. Once I'm done, put that into my transform JSON, and then use this transformation to transform the data. And I'll explain that in a bit. So using this transformation itself is, if we go into Plinqx Design Studio, we have our mock demo. So the name of that one. So use this transformation. And what that does is it takes the data from a Salesforce structure and then transform it into our Bceptor structure. It's kind of cool in a way, because you can just come over here and say, look, I want the data to be transformed like that, or I want to remove a data field, and then you can just save that and deploy it, and it would update your integration for you. So that is an example we've spoken about earlier about transforming structures. So we have the designer within Salesforce to transform that, or within Plinqx. Once that is transformed, then I want you to go and call the Bceptor. So call Bceptor, which is a named credential in the platform. So we do have, if I go back in here within our publisher, so named credentials is a standard Salesforce feature. So named credentials is, I allow you to call this system, outside system. Remember, we did the credentials earlier for Plinqx. So I've just created the Plinqx ones, or the Bceptor ones. If we click through that to the backend, it is typical. I'm not going to get there now. But we can follow the wizard and create them here throughout the wizard. We'll send you the documentation. But within Salesforce, what happens is, if I get back into our backend, that will just create the named credential within the platform, standard Salesforce named credentials through our little wizard. So allowing us to call out of Salesforce another system. And then once you're doing this, do the post call. So remember, we said we're going to do a post. We can do other methods here too. So if it was to go and get data, patch data is update, put data is also update, delete. Head is not really used. It's just getting the first record. And then options and trace and connect are deprecated, but it's for old systems. I personally haven't used them before. And then send this transformed JSON to the system here. So let's put that to a test. So if we go to John and we just name him John here, save that off, we will have our event that was passed and Johnny was sent to the system. So that is just an example of that flow trigger then firing based on the logic.